Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, The Medieval Reader. So today, for Medieval Monday, we will be continuing with Marco Polo, talking about chapters 3 and 4. So chapter 3 is on Kublai Khan, and chapter 4 is also on Kublai Khan. Actually, most of the book is about the Great Khan and his empire, but chapter 4 is called From Peking to Bengal. Chapter 3 is mostly about Kublai Khan's palace. He has two palaces, one for the summer and one for the winter, what he looked like, his war strategies, his obsession with certain kinds of animals, particularly hawking. And then chapter 4 is where we begin to learn about all of the different lands that are subjected to the Great Khan's rule. So first, I wanted to point out a few things literary in chapters 3 and 4. So the first thing that struck me was the amount of repetition. There is this one line, "The people are idolaters and subject to the Great Khan." That line is repeated over and over again at nearly every page. And there's also this passage, "So loud was the shouting and the clash of armies that you could not have heard the thunder of heaven." So who is this you? Well, the reader. And the author speaking to the reader was a trope that existed in the epics. So you see this in the Song of Roland, where the anonymous author is telling us, if you were there at the Battle of Roncevaux, this is what you would have seen. You would have seen Roland fighting valiantly against the Saracens. So this is, again, a trope that we find in Marco Polo, further confirming that Marco Polo got some help from a romance writer, Rustichello of Pisa, whom I mentioned last week. So, these kind of literary elements really caught my attention. And there are other things as well. There are details that really resemble the saints' lives. I did mention that last week, but I saw a lot more of that this week. All kinds of stories about the soothsayers and the astrologers in Kublai Khan's empire, and how they're able to, through their demonic arts, Marco Polo, or the author who is writing for Marco Polo, attributes all of these magical things to the devil, but they are still really impressive. So, for example, Kublai Khan, instead of having someone bring him dishes, is somehow able to summon the dishes to come to him without anybody bringing them, which is really amazing. And there are other things that the Bhakti, the astrologers, are able to bring about through their magical arts. And this is the reason why Kublai Khan ultimately, even though he is fascinated by Christianity, this is why he doesn't adopt Christianity. He doesn't convert, he doesn't get baptized, because, as he told Marco Polo, the Christian priests are not able to do these sort of miracles. And he says, well, as long as the Bhakti are able to give me what I want, why would I seek elsewhere? He is actually quite tolerant of different religions. So in the empire, there are a number of different monastic groups of varying religious sensibilities, and they all live together, and the Khan accepts them. He accepts the Muslims and the Christians and whatever other religions are there, as long as they're not committing treason. That I thought was quite impressive, especially for the period. Finally, with respect to the literary elements in chapters 3 and 4, the author mentions that he is leaving out certain details. It's clear that he is picking and choosing what aspects of the voyages he wants to describe. So he says, for example, since this province, which is one of the provinces that he's describing, contains nothing else worthy of mentioning, I'm going to move on and talk about a different land. So he'll do that over and over again. So it's clear that these details are selected to create a good story. In the prologue, the author, this anonymous author who's writing about Marco Polo, he mentions that he is going to describe the events in a way that doesn't necessarily reflect Marco Polo's journey chronologically, because he wants to divide them up into different sections. So he will mention something about India and he'll say, oh, well, I don't want to talk about India now, we'll talk about India later, things like that. So he is creating a narrative based on Marco Polo's voyages. So that was really interesting. Chapter 3 is really where all the excitement begins. Kublai Khan is presented as this powerful leader. Marco Polo says he is the most powerful leader the world has ever seen and that the world will ever see. He is very impressed by the Khan's rule, despite all of the descriptive words that he uses, idolater, demonic, these sort of things. And you can tell that he's very impressed, and not just impressed because he's able to conquer through force, but also because he shows a surprising amount of justice and generosity towards his people. The thing that Marco Polo finds the most interesting, arguably, is the Khan's obsession with animals. So he hunts all the time. He's really into hawking. He owns gerfalcons and peregrine falcons, and lands that are surrounding the capital. People are not allowed to hunt in those regions. So he's really into gaming. He's into hunting all kinds of what Marco Polo sees as very exotic animals. He even has a lion who has been trained to prostrate before the Great Khan in his palace. My favorite description of an animal is the description of a crocodile, which I will read to you now. In this province live huge snakes and serpents, of such a size that no one could help being amazed, even to hear of them. They are loathsome creatures to behold. Let me tell you just how big they are. You may take it for a fact that there are some of them 10 paces in length that are as thick as a stout cask, for their girth runs to about 10 palms. These are the biggest. They have 2 squat legs in front near the head, which have no feet but simply 3 claws, 2 small and 1 bigger, like the claws of a falcon or a lion. They have enormous heads and eyes so bulging that they are bigger than loaves. Their mouth is big enough to swallow a man at 1 gulp. Their teeth are huge. All in all, the monsters are of such inordinate bulk and ferocity that there is neither man nor beast but goes in fear of them. There are also smaller ones, not exceeding 8 paces in length, or 6, or it may be 5. When I first read this description, I hadn't read the footnotes that said it is a crocodile, and I was like, what kind of serpent has legs? And as I was reading it, I was going, oh, he's talking about a crocodile. So this must have been Marco Polo's first time seeing a crocodile. He also talks about yaks. He talks about the Himalayan musk deer while he's in Tibet. So he's encountering a lot of animals that are not indigenous to Western Europe. And he's really impressed, but he's having difficulties finding the words to describe them. And I thought this was just really funny. Because of all the wild animals in Tibet, we learned in chapter 4, the canes are set on fire and they make this explosive sound that's so loud that it's deafening, it's startling. The animals, horses get terrified of the sound. But the locals will use this technique to keep wild animals at bay. It's clear that for Marco Polo, the Great Khan is a civilizing force. When he describes the kingdoms subjected to the Khan before they were conquered, you can tell that the Kublai Khan is concerned about certain indigenous practices. So, for example, you'll have lands that used to kill nobles in their houses, seeing it as a blessing because the blood of a noble was spilled in their house, and somehow the nobility would then be passed on. That is what the author of the Travels says. But when Kublai Khan comes in and conquers the land, he outlaws these practices. And over again, we see how the Great Khan comes in and then eradicates certain practices that he feels are barbaric. And Marco Polo seems to think that that's really great and a sign of intelligence and culture. So I think that's really interesting because when we think about civilizing forces, we usually think about it as the West civilizing, people in the New World or people in Africa or whatever. But here we're seeing, this kind of conquest going on in the East, and it's really, really fascinating. The Khan has a wonderful postal service, so every 25 miles there's a post with so many hundred horses, and the postmen, they will ride 25 miles and then switch horses and then ride another 25 miles, and by doing so, they can cover hundreds of miles within a day. And it's slower at night if they really need to get somewhere more quickly, and they need the night, they will take it. But unfortunately, it actually takes longer at night than during the day, because there are people who have to actually walk in front of the horses holding torches to lead the way. So, you have horses following people walking, so that slows down the pace. But ultimately, if you include the daytime with the night postmen, they're going to cover more distance. There are other cultural practices that I found interesting. The zodiac is mentioned, so there's a cycle of 12 years with each year dedicated to an animal. So I was born in the year of the monkey, in case you want to know. And there's also tattooing. In one of the lands in what we would today call China, there are people who tattoo on their arms, and Marco Polo compares it to purgatory. He's like, this must be like a purgatory, because people suffer so much as they are poking holes in their bodies and then putting ink in it to create a design, which is what a tattoo is. But evidently some of the people would bleed to death, so not something you should try at home. Perhaps the most titillating part of this book deals with the various marriage and sexual practices in the Khan's empire, and they vary from region to region. So in some of the provinces, women are encouraged to be promiscuous before marriage, to have sex with as many men as possible, so that they can win these tokens. They're tokens that basically they can then hang up and show as their conquests. So it's almost kind of like what some frat guys do. But yeah, so women are encouraged to be sexually promiscuous so as to show that they have experience before marriage. But once they are married, they have to be chaste. In some of the regions, the men allow their wives to be taken by any man. It doesn't appear that it's always consensual. But in another land, the author, or Marco Polo, we'll just call him Marco Polo, claims that women are allowed to have sex with whomever, even while they're married, as long as it's consensual, as long as the women consent to it. They're open marriages, and they're perfectly acceptable. Marco Polo ends by saying, obviously, the country is a fine one to visit for a lad from 16 to 24. And indeed, the merchant quarters in Kublai Khan's Khan Balik, which is the capital of his empire, are filled with prostitutes. And in fact, the prostitutes are there to attract merchants. And they trade all kinds of things: cloth, stones, silk, all kinds of different things. So yeah, Kublai Khan has this great empire going with paper currency, with a some kind of a welfare system, care for the environment, religious pluralism. He is very tough with people accused of treason. He tries not to spill blood in his executions, but they're still executions. He's very open to learning about different cultures, and there is some permission given to these different lands to enjoy a certain level of independence and autonomy, but not completely, because if the Great Khan thinks that those indigenous practices are, problematic, he will outlaw them. There is a study that I've been eyeing, I forget the name, I will link it below, that I think I will try to check out from the library, and it's a description of Marco Polo's China, or Kublai Khan's China, according to Marco Polo, and I think it looks at all the different details and, evaluates it for authenticity. So I will look into that, because I really do want to know how much of this is true and how much of it is not. And occasionally Robert Latham, who translated and edited this Penguin Classics edition, sometimes he does say, this is what Marco Polo's talking about, suggesting that these things are actually true. But sometimes, are people able to move cups without humans? I mean, I don't know. So there's certain things in here and that make me wonder how true they are, and especially these literary references, again, bring into question for me their authenticity. I am now into a new thing, and I'm like really excited about that. So I hope this was interesting, and I look forward to talking about chapters 5 and 6 next week. Thank you everybody for watching, and I will talk to you later. Bye now.